Hi, welcome to another episode of Wikipedia Weekly. I'm your host, Andrew Lih, also known as user Fuzzheado on the Wikimedia projects. So thank you for joining us for a very special episode of Wikipedia Weekly, where we'll be talking about structured data on Commons, one of the newest projects in the Wikimedia universe, and probably one of the more exciting and radical capabilities that we'll be getting in the Wikimedia movement. So we are looking forward to talking about this new set of capabilities that very few people actually have had a lot of experience with. So hopefully this will debunk and help explain some of what's going on. So before we get further, I'd like to introduce the other folks I'll be talking with. So we have John Cummings. Tell us where you're coming from and tell us a little bit about you, John.
Hi, so today you find me in Wales, in the UK. For the last 5 or 6 years, I've been Wikipedia in residence at UNESCO. I've been helping UN agencies share their knowledge on Wikipedia, and I'm really interested in structured data on Commons because I think it's like an incredibly valuable way of a new way of sharing information from organizations.
That's great. Thanks, John. And Richard, tell us where you are and what you're up to.
Hi, Richard, Knipel, user Pharos on Wikimedia projects, coming to you from New York. I'm glad to help with the Wikipedia Weekly and Network podcast, and I've been experiencing some of structured data on Commons, more of a Wikidata person, and I'm glad to sort of get the interface between Commons and Wikidata that is structured data on Commons. So glad to learn more today.
Great, thank you. And that's it's something that's really interesting about structured data on Commons is that very few people kind of know everything. So we're going to try to boil down everything that we've kind of collectively put together, and we'd love to hear from the audience. So you're probably watching us on YouTube or Facebook or maybe later on, but if you want to tell us where you're watching from, we'd also love your interactions. This is the best of what we could wrestle up and to wrangle up related to structured data on Commons, but it might be that you have run into things that we don't know or examples that help illuminate things we're talking about. So feel free to send those through. We can actually bring up your comments on screen as we are talking, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. If you're on Facebook, go to streamyard.com/Facebook and you can authenticate at that site. And then when you have your comments on screen, it'll have your name rather than just Facebook user. If you're on YouTube, then we'll already see your name and your face so we can bring that up on screen. So we welcome comments from folks. Tell us where you're watching from, what kind of projects you're working on, or what kind of things you're interested in related to structured data on Commons. That'll help us hone the discussion more towards what you're interested in. But as Richard said, almost all three of us work in some way as a Wikimedian in residence with a GLAM institution, a library, archive, or museum. I'm working with both the Met and the Smithsonian on open access and wiki projects. So certainly all these entities are talking with, are interested in structured data on Commons in some way. So let's get started and talk a little bit about where we are with structured data on Commons, or what it really is. So if you want to get access to these slides, it is at the bit.ly link SDC 2021-explained. So SDC 2021-explained. Now maybe Richard, you can make a banner with that somewhere because I forgot to make a banner for that. And we can scroll it across the bottom there. Okay, so bit.ly/SDC, which stands for Structured Data on Commons 2021-explain, and that'll get you to the slide deck that we're using here, which has a lot of different examples and things you might want to peruse. So the way that we like to describe what SDC is imagine our world in the era of 2001, right? We had Wikipedia articles. We have articles about highly notable topics across different languages, but they're kind of inconsistent, right? Like the article we have in English about a topic may not be the same as the Spanish or the German or anything else, right? And then one thing we also had a need for was centralizing content, right? So Wikimedia Commons was created as a multimedia file repository in 2004, not long after Wikipedia is created. It currently contains more than 70 million files. 90% of those are image files. So we can have movies and 3D objects, but 90% are image files, JPEG and TIFF files mostly. And it's built on top of Media Wiki software for the Wikimedia movement. So the software we use for writing articles was kind of like hacked to do 70 million images. Let's just put it this way. Wasn't really built to be what we call a digital asset management system, which is what more modern folks are used to dealing with at museums, at libraries, dealing with high resolution images and things like that. So we are kind of working with this mismatch of older software that wasn't built for multimedia with modern needs, right? Discoverability for stuff in Commons is through a basic search and categories, right? So if we want to view this as the relationship of Wikipedia with Commons, we can have 70 million files in Wikimedia Commons. But we have some problems here. Is that anyone who's ever done a search on Commons knows that it's often not a very useful endeavor. Like, we don't have great search results typically, and most people will wind up using Google to try to find stuff on Commons. The category system is not great, right? It's very English centric, and it lacks set operations, right? So if we wanted to go in and say, show me all images of horses with dogs after 1931, and then you start getting into things that Commons really cannot do well. So again, the challenges of Wikimedia Commons are that the categories are English centric and not multilingual. In fact, they're even kind of haphazardly organized, right? So if you want to put an image of like a woman journalist into Wikipedia, is it women American journalists, or is it American women journalists, or is it journalists? So there's all different ways to configure that, and it's kind of unpredictable what those things are. So that's always been a pain. So John, Richard, what are some of the other pain points of using Commons now in terms of discoverability and searchability beyond the things that we talked about?
It's very lovingly handmade and awkward. It's I mean, and it's hard to find things. It's hard to say, do we have this as a topic? What might its topic be? Is the title in English? Is it another language? What convention might use? What spelling? What apostrophes? All sorts of uncertainties, and just trying to find what intersections are appropriate. And should we have all these wacky intersections, or should we not? And my understanding is that structured data on Commons makes a little bit of that intersection discussion obsolete, in that it just lets you code for one thing and then another thing and then another thing, and not having to decide, are these three things a coherent intersection that we should make a category for and hand maintain it for the next 20 years?
Right. And it's great. We have some comments here from Daniel Schwen. Good to see you there. And he did note that there are some tools that do category intersections. If you've seen a cool tool like Petscan, we actually have a really cool tool that does that. It's a little bit painful because they time out quite a bit if you're looking at very deep things, but we do have some tools that do this, right, John?
Yeah, and I think one thing for me is, so I've lived in France for the last 5 years, and I've started to work a little bit more with French on Commons, and not having the special accents on my keyboard and things like that is quite difficult. And also as Richard was saying, a lot of it is kind of handmade. So I think there's a category on Common which is British gentlemen in the 18th century smoking pipes. So that's incredibly
It's
neat.
my favorite category.
Yeah. But then there's also there's also a ginormous category for cats with 10,000 cats in. So it's really inconsistent in terms of modeling, which makes it quite hard to use.
Right. And so Daniel Schwen has pointed to some tools that help us do those things. But you're right in that sometimes these categories are made not because they're good ontological tools, but just simply because the category got too big. You just need to make a new category, which is not a good rationale for these types of things, right? So those are the challenges, among many other things. So the solution we have for this is, let's learn from our experiences with Wikidata. So if you're not familiar with Wikidata, a very quick summary of Wikidata is it captures knowledge in a semantic database, right? So rather than storing things as just strings of text like we do in Wikipedia, Wikidata breaks those down into three-part statements, right? So instead of reading a sentence and understanding the sentence, we can break down the facts of that sentence into United States Congress is an instance of a bicameral legislature, or United States Congress is in the country of the United States. So these are things that you can store in a database and are much easier to manipulate and to search, right? So that's the basic tenet of Wikidata. So we can actually use that kind of basic operating principle of Wikidata and say, well, if we can store these facts into a database like Wikidata, why don't we bring that same capability into Commons and store all this metadata that's kind of free-flowing with templates and text descriptions and categories, and make them explicit things that we store in a Wikidata-like way in structured data on Commons. That's basically what SDC is, right? So the benefits that it gets us is that we kind of get this language independence, that categories and classification now are using a Wikidata type schema. So that means that we can actually be multilingual by default, and that we can link out to other databases more easily, right? So that's kind of the idea, is let's bring the Wikidata capabilities, right? Instead of storing things as prose, we store them as structures and statements, and let's bring those benefits from Wikidata to Commons. That's kind of the 10,000-foot view summary of what we're doing here, right?
So
go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, just one small thing to add to that. So because Commons has been in English for so long, I think there's this general idea, which I don't think is very helpful, of this like, oh, we bring English information to people who speak other languages. I think the other way around is equally as important, more important, in fact. We bring language across to all languages. So I have a friend whose first language is Tamil. If she takes a photograph in India and she writes the description in Tamil using structured data on Commons, the labels are translated for me. I don't have to do anything. Like, it's all just there. And if the label is missing and I translate the label because she tells me what the label means, that label is there for everyone. That label is like there for everyone to use forever, which I think is amazing. Like, it's a real, how do I say this? Like a real value to sharing knowledge between cultures, not just west to east or north to south. It's really like everyone to everyone.
Yeah, that's a great point. We're really making kind of interconnected mesh of knowledge at that point, right? That it is everyone helping everyone else once you get this kind of semantic database as the heart of what we're doing. That's right. So the idea here is we can bring these Wikidata style statements into structured data on Commons. Then we can do things like what you see here, like Marie Curie's image depicts her, Marie Curie, but also depicts a woman. And you can say there's a chair in there, there's a flask in there, there's a Bunsen burner, all these things. So that really ups the discoverability of content once we do that. And it also gives us all kinds of other capabilities like reporting. So now we can say like, well, we know there's 2,000 sites of national heritage. How many do we have? And a query can find those much faster than right now in Commons. You got to kind of guess the category and is everything being categorized correctly and things like that. That is much easier with a structured database. And then batch editing, meaning that we can actually check if certain things are done already on a file and then do much easier batch operations without requiring people to code bots and things like that. And then really interesting visualizations that we can show you later that you can do once you can query these things quickly. Right. So the benefits, as John was just saying, multilingual is one of the huge benefits here. Right. So one great example we like to use from the Wikidata world is, let's just say we have this relationship here, like George Washington is an instance of human, right? And then the numbers that we use in Wikidata are Q numbers and P numbers, right? The Q numbers are kind of the nouns and the Ps are the properties that we have. So once someone has entered in this fact into Wikidata, like George Washington is an instance of human, then pretty much anyone else in the world benefits from that because we have those labels already translated into 300 plus languages, right? We have instance of translated into Spanish, Chinese, Malaysian, Bahasa Malayu, and then human as well. So all we need to do is make sure those labels are translated. And then once someone adds a statement into structured data on Commons, the world benefits from it, as John said. So there's some really interesting examples of how this has helped. Like folks like in the US have helped catalog things for folks in Brazil because we used Wikidata and we could move things around and the labels are already translated. So I don't need to know Portuguese to help out a GLAM in Portugal. Similarly, someone in India speaking Tamil doesn't need to know English to help out another entity as well. So really great things that we can do with the multilingual capabilities there. And then accessibility. John, you want to talk a little bit about this as one of the prime benefits of SDC?
Yeah, I guess like I think that there's a lot of content on Commons because it's mostly image based that's really inaccessible to people with vision problems. So like I personally have occasionally have some vision problems and have to have very big text on my computer. And Commons really doesn't work if you put your text up to like 600%. So
Right.
I think there's a lot of really interesting tools and like resources that can be created through adding descriptions of images, descriptions of videos, things like that, and just really like having a tool that has very much more clear descriptions and documentation around it allows people who have specific needs to kind of fulfill those needs.
Right. That's a great point. Here's a comment that I really appreciate. Someone said, putting in it depicts woman and Marie Curie could count as overcategorization. I absolutely agree with you, and does not match how these are used in Wikidata. That is absolutely correct. And this is a long-term culture clash we're going to have to figure out is, do we map over everything we're doing in Wikidata over to structured data on Commons? And at this point in time, in April 2021, the answer right now is they are divergent and it's okay. Now, does it mean that long-term we want to make sure they mesh together? So because we know in Wikidata, we can inherently tell that Marie Curie is a woman, so we can do that search. But Commons folks may not be so up on how Wikidata and subclasses work. So do we need to, at least at this point, add both it depicts a woman and depicts Marie Curie? And from what I know, John, you tell me if I'm wrong, right now, the best practice right now is to add both statements.
Yeah, so this is one thing that I'm going to be working on this month and next month, is really trying to help people learn more about structured data on Commons and to help people who work on Commons learn more about Wikidata. So I'm going to be working on some documentation. Like, I'm not a programmer. I don't have a background in kind of technical things. I'm a real sort of muggle. So I'm going to kind of write documentation for like people who are new to this, and hopefully that will really help. And we're going to talk about this later on, but I think one of the things that will really help is kind of standard setting and schemas around this.
Right. But that's a great question. And, you know, as someone who works very much with Wikidata, it doesn't drive me nuts, but it is one of these concerns that I have. Like, this is the Wikidata mode of doing it. I wouldn't do it this way, but in structured data on Commons, the accepted practice is to extensively list the obvious things people might be searching for discoverability. So I'll do it this way in structured data on Commons. But you're absolutely right that from an ontological standpoint, you probably don't want to overstuff the depict statements with everything that's there. But yeah,
even with Wikidata, like, you know, there's a lot of, like, we had a discussion yesterday on their program about, you know, is it a sculpture? Is it a statue? Is it a figurine? I mean, it might make sense if it's not a very developed area. It might make sense to mark it as all three. Until there can be a better ontology developed, a better, you know, agreed upon format of these things. And so these things are evolving, and, you know, depending on, you know, what do you actually want when you're using a tag like depicts woman? Are you trying to find pictures of famous women? Or are you trying to find a particular type of stock image that could be used to illustrate a general topic? It sort of also depends on that, and what your use case might be, and in that case it might be different.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we'll talk about some specifics later on in this area. So I'm glad people brought it up early. So this is related to that as well. So searchability, discoverability, we want to find content through better descriptive metadata. So that means depicted concepts and themes, maybe provenance or source info, or location and geodata. Daniel Schwen mentioned before, like, it'd be great to have good location data for all of these images that we have baked into the structured data. And then integration with Wikimedia projects is also a great promise here, right? That by having the structured data, structured metadata, we can actually integrate it with Wikimedia content, whether it's Wikipedia, Wiktionary, Wikitravel, in ways that we couldn't before. Right? And then new uses. So we can do all kinds of neat things with rich multimedia content. If anyone's ever used Wikidata Query, and we can show you some examples later of how this works with structured data on Commons, you can make timelines, maps, bubble charts, interactive graphs fairly easily with the content that comes back from a search. So that's a capability in the hands of ordinary users. Could be really great to see those types of things. And then we also have ways with structured data on Commons of now better evaluating gaps in our topic areas. So for things like what percentage of portraits are of women or men for a particular topic, that is a trivial thing to figure out if you've got good structured data on Commons content in there. So these are things that we can measure better and report on better. And then also we have this ability to reuse the content in ways that we don't even know about yet. So by having an API that external parties can jack into Commons and do interesting things with, we'll probably see a lot of interesting experiments and projects from outside entities once they start taking advantage of all the metadata we're adding to Commons. So that's just a summary of some of the new uses that we might have. And then it allows for better exploration, right? So once we have all the structured metadata, we can also do all kinds of cool things. And John, you made a great point here of kind of finally reaching the 5-star open data plan that I think Tim Berners-Lee made this plan like 1990s. So we're finally meeting this, right?
Yeah, so the 5-star open data plan talks about, it's basically a guide for reusability of data. So most organizations that I've worked with either produce data in a PDF, so they'll produce data as a table in a PDF. So if you want to use that, that's quite difficult. You have to sort of copy out the PDF and it doesn't quite copy across properly. And yeah, if you have a copy from a PDF, you know the problems. And then the kind of next step up is to release it as a spreadsheet. But what linked open data does, it allows data to really be reused with other data sets much more easily. So if you have a data set that has metrics on, say, like a specific person, and then you have another data set that has the same name, how do you know that's the same person? What happens is if you use Wikidata or structured data on Commons, you can really identify that's the same person. So as an example, my friend Andy works on disambiguating scientists in scientific publications. And in many parts of the world, many people have the same name. So I think it's in Vietnam. I think around half of the people in Vietnam have the same surname. So there are often if you search for a scientist's name in Vietnam, you'll have it will tell you in the search that one person wrote like 50,000 scientific papers, which is clearly if they did, that's amazing. But it really helps disambiguate things like this. There are lots of things in the world with the same name. And it also allows you to, how do I say this? Translate across languages. So if you know this concept in one language, so if I want to understand some data from South Korea, don't have to learn Korean. I can just ask Wikidata what that means in English.
Right. And in the world of library science, those are like authority control, right? So anytime you see it's weird because you can see these in Wikipedia, but a lot of people may not ever know what it means. Like if you go to the bottom of an article, especially biography articles, you'll see this little box that says authority control and all this gobbledygook afterwards. But those are definitive identifiers in other databases, and usually national libraries or OCLC and these big organizations. So as someone said, ORCID is a great identifier for exactly what you're talking about. Like a unique identifier. What's that?
Yeah, that's what my friend Andy works with, is ORCID.
Great.
One thing to say about Wikidata with authority control is, and I think it's something that's we don't make enough hay about, is maybe a way to say it. I'm not sure if that translates into American English. Is that what you're doing with these external identifiers? You're linking together knowledge from across the web. You're saying this is the accumulated knowledge across the web on this topic, which I think is incredibly powerful and something we haven't really we don't have the tools to use as well as we could. But I think it could be a really interesting area for development, especially in research.
I think it is really valuable, especially it's like a universal catalog, Wikidata, and I guess Wikibase as it connects to it, in that it's sort of a non-profit neutral thing that, say, different museums or libraries or different institutions can collaborate on. And it's a curious opportunity, and also it's sort of fun because sometimes it's really obvious, like this is a person and this matches the same person, but also what is this concept, the process of painting, or the process of is it a mosaic or is it the mosaicism? There's some human debate about these topics and what matches which in which dictionaries and which databases, and that's also sort of an interesting advantage of a wiki approach to it.
Yeah, and we were at a librarian conference recently, and I love this description of what authority control records are, because I think for librarians, they get it. But we're kind of like new to this whole world of like, oh yeah, we're dealing with authority control records now. And I love the definition they had, that the authority control record is the end of the chain of verification. And I really like that, right? It's like the definitive rooting is that this is exactly who this person is, and you don't have to search any further, right? And that's the value of an authority control record. So I love the last portion of that. If you look over there, the LOD icon has the little nodes of the graph extending beyond the borders of the paper, right? And that's a good description of what federated search is, right? It's no longer you're searching within a database. You can actually, with a real federated search as a new capability, you can say, I want to look at this painting in this database, which corresponds to that artist in that database, which is at the Getty, let's say, and that database, which is over there at the National Library of Germany. And you can actually do a search across databases in different locales. And that's the promise, right, of this new capability that Tim Berners-Lee is describing. That, believe it or not, he described in the 1990s, but we're only getting around to implementing it now. So
there's actually... So Tim Berners-Lee, I'm going to kind of mangle this, so please, like, citation needed. When he first started writing about the concept of the World Wide Web, he envisaged that was an encyclopedia at this kind of heart of it to help people find information.
Yeah,
I kind of think like Wikidata is like kind of like the new part of that. It's like we had Wikipedia for kind of prose, and now we have Wikidata and structured data on Commons to have that kind of central place, that central node to find things for data and kind of media content.
Absolutely. I think we're realizing the dream, which is great. So let's get to some tangible examples here. So let's talk about some of the basics here. So if you've never seen it in action, it's live. So SDC is live, but it's sometimes hard to find. So if you are looking at a file, go to the structured data tab down there. Now, John, maybe you want to say a little bit about even the file information there is already structured data, right? What can you tell us about the captions and things like that that the SDC folks want us to use or in Commons?
Okay, so I guess like there's a difference between a caption and a description. And like, please correct me, people in the chat, if I get this a little wrong, is that the caption kind of is a description of what's in the photograph. So let's pretend that there's a photograph of 5 sugar cubes. Like it would be that you can, so the structured data around like a picture of 5 sugar cubes would be like number of cubes, 5, like material, sugar, like that kind of thing. So I guess like the way that we talked before about this difference between data and prose, I guess the file information is more prose and the structured data is obviously more data.
Right,
and these kind of, this is like not, I guess I'd say like this is not a fully realized interface. You can actually see there is some structured data in the file information tab. So if you scroll down slightly, you can see kind of like the author of the photo that links to Wikidata. So this kind of like relationship between prose and structured data is not kind of a finished thing yet, I guess.
Yeah. So you're right. And just to make sure people know, like for the average person, they're looking at the Marie Curie file, which is great. And it looks like everything is very, very nicely ordered. But let's make sure you remember that if you hit edit source here, this is a good old style template, right, in Wiki markup. And what happens is this all has to be kind of manually entered here. Whereas if you go here to structured data, these are actually statements in a what we call Wikibase, right, which is kind of the extension to MIDI wiki software that allows for this content to be fully compliant with what Tim Berners-Lee was talking about, right, what we call an RDF database. So this is truly database content we're looking at here. This is templated content here, right, which if you hit the edit source is information we have. It's what we might call semi-structured, but it's not really structured, right?
I think one of the real things that structured data on Commons offers is easier contribution, like the potential for easier contribution. Like if you click on the file information tab, the amount of assumed knowledge in that interface is huge.
Right.
So it assumes you know what wiki text is. It assumes you know what a template is and how a template works. And it assumes you know how to look for the fields in the template. There is so much assumed knowledge there that, like, with a good interface, structured data on Commons could help address.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a great point. Like this is a mystery to folks. Like, do you remember all the fields here or what to do here? It requires a lot of knowledge to do that. So that is just your basics of the interface. The structured data is found there. We deal with MIDs for structured data on Commons. So this might be a new thing for a lot of folks. You may know that Wikidata uses Q numbers, right? So if I go to wikidata.org and I just click on random item, you'll notice that, wow, that's not a great random item. Let's try another great random item. Oh, we're getting all kinds of interesting astronomical phenomena here. And RNA, let's get something better. No label. Wow, come on. Oh, okay, here we go. So here's a scholarly article. But you know that the Q number here, right? There's the Q number. That's a unique identifier there. The Q number is also here, right? But for Wiki Commons, we deal with the MID. So pretty much everything you do in Wikidata with a Q number, you do with an M number with structured data on Commons, right? So the way you can find that is you can click on the concept URI right there, right? So if I go down here, how do you find it? You click on this link right there. I have a little script that just puts it up here because we're doing so much now with structured data on Commons. I like to see it better as a big number always on my page there. But that is what we're dealing with. So if we can take that number, all the things we're used to dealing with for Wikidata, you can do with Commons. So I'm with structured data on Commons. So you can do something like M327355756, and then depicts as a property, we use the Wikidata depicts P180, and then her Q number in Wikidata is Q7186. Does that make sense? So that is the triple that is being stored, or three-part statement that's being stored right here for this statement that we're seeing right there. What's stored in Wikibase is that. Does that make sense? Okay. So the Wikibase is an extension to Commons now that runs in the background that does all this stuff here. Now, if we look at more information, we're looking at a different file here because the Marie Curie image is public domain, so there's not as many interesting fields. But let's look at another file here. And you can see this one depicts Gina Torres, but it also has a creator information, which is a picture I took. But it has a copyright statement, it has the license, has a source, has the inception. So you can bake all this information into the structured data on Commons metadata, right? So this is an example of many, many, many fields that are added to a file, right? So these are just some examples of what we are looking for in the structured metadata. Any other comments from folks on that? If not, let's go ahead and take a look here. If you want to find more information, you can go to this page on Commons, Commons::structured data. There's a lot of description as to what we're doing right now, including a nice introduction as well to structured data on Commons.
And one thing to say about this, I'm spending this month and part of next month really helping improve these pages on Commons. So if you have any suggestions, like, I want to know this thing and I can't find it, or like other kind of things like that, please just click on the discussion page, leave me a note, I'll see it, and I'll try and help you. And I really want to make this a place where people can go and learn, really learn how to do it, not just like, it's a thing and there's not many instructions and some people can do it. I want to make it a thing that's like part of the process of sharing knowledge in Wikimedia. I think it's so powerful and like got so much potential. I really want to like try and help it a bit.
And ideally, these things will evolve quite a bit, and because it's structured data, there are all sorts of interfaces that can be built on top of it and on the side of it, in between it, that has a lot more potential for, if they don't exist quite now, a lot more potential for like really deep, easy interfaces that you can't have with something like prose like Wikipedia. Right.
I'm glad we have some folks who have a good historical context here. Someone is saying maybe we shouldn't feel so bad. RDF was only developed in 97, published in 99. That's true, though. I think if you remember Tim Berners-Lee's original paper about the World Wide Web, it imagined this stuff even before the RDF standard, right? But you're right. We shouldn't feel too bad about ourselves, but we should keep things in historical perspective. Some other folks saying, I'm from Sri Lanka, I've been editing, but some concerns about copyright. Yeah, I mean, outside of SDC, copyright on Commons can be really hard to navigate because we're dealing with national laws, we're dealing with US laws and everything in between, right? Yeah. So that's good to hear that folks are learning more about the history of RDF and the standards that we're dealing with here. So let's look at some of the best tools and techniques that we have right now. This is the most interesting thing, I think, because even assembling the slide deck was not easy because there's no one-stop shopping for all the stuff that we're talking about. So I think this is a good start to maybe bring some of the stuff from this presentation onto some wiki page where we can describe all these things. So number one, search does work already with this structured data on Commons. It has this cryptic statement that you need to put in there, or a cryptic incantation. So use has WB statement colon, and then you put the the predicate and object afterwards, right? So to remember this, has WB refers to wiki base. So as John mentioned before, unfortunately, we're requiring people to kind of need to know some of the names that we use for the internal projects that we have, like Wikibase. So already I'm kind of like cringing, like, okay, we have to expose to the public. They need to know what Wikibase is. Anyway, has WB statement colon P180 equals 3116510. So Q3116510 is frog, just a generic frog. And I'll be honest, I often get this mixed up. Sometimes I'll put has WB statement equals. Nope, it's not. It's colon, right? So that's how we do it. So let's try that out. Let's go ahead and say into Commons. So you can say has WB statement, right? Colon or equals? Colon, right? P180 equal. And what is the Q number? Or,
I don't remember.
Frog. Well, let's do 146. We all know what 146 is. What is 146? Cat, right? All right. So this is just a general, very basic search for cat, which means that if you open up any of these files, beautiful cat there, you should look in structured data and it should say depicts house cat, right? Cat is here. If I click on this, you'll see it is in fact Q146, right? So that is basically what this search is doing. It's going through to see any files that have structured data depicts house cat. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah.
And one thing to say about this should work for quite a lot of files. So around 80 or 90% of files on Commons have some form of structured data. And the last time I checked, which was like last week or the week before, around 4 million have depicts equals statements. So it's not a very large percentage at the moment, but 4 million pictures is quite a lot.
Yeah.
So have those been extracted from categories, or have they been added manually, or been a great mix of the two?
I don't know. It'd be really interesting to know where those statements are coming from, whether people are adding statements to existing images or whether it's starting to become part of the process of sharing information. I'd be really interested to know that.
Yeah, there's a bunch of bots running. So some are running from the kind of glam side. So like Martin Dammers runs a bot that we have lots of good metadata for paintings and artworks. So there's a lot that's been done on that side. There's some other ones probably working off categories, some working off of scraping the wiki text and knowing exactly what it is. So yeah, we're slowly building up that body of knowledge in the statements. So that's a very basic search, and you can do that right now, and I encourage people to try that. You can do and, you put multiple things, it'll do an and of those things. I can't remember whether I put in an example of qualifiers. Did I put a qualifier? Yes, I did. Okay, so the other thing you can do is combine a traditional search plus an SDC search, right? So you can actually use deep cat, right, which is like a deep category search. So you can combine looking at a category plus a Wikibase statement, right? So you can say, show me all the featured pictures of cats with this query, which is kind of cool, right? Another thing you can do is also add a qualifier. So you can actually put a P180 equals Q146 will show you cats, but then you can also look one level deeper into the depict statement and say eye color equals black or color equals black, right? I don't think that's eye color. I think it's color. So P462 equals 23445, and that'll show you all black cats, which is kind of cool, right? So that's a way to not only combine search results, but also add a qualifier to the search.
So this is kind of like the structured data on commons version of the category 18th century gentlemen smoking pipes. Like this is how you can get that kind of resolution of specificity using it without needing such like specific categories.
Ideally, and I think Richard's kind of the king of depictions because he finds ways to depict things I never would have thought of, but make complete sense. So P180 statements with interesting qualifiers is
I hope we can maybe that could be a goal after this session as we get those 18th century gentlemen smoking pipes and get them well represented, and 18th century women smoking pipes, and anything else we can find. And
we had a show yesterday where we talked about not only does something depicts a woman, but you can actually say gesture seated, right, or gesture waving. Like you can actually go to that level of specificity if you have the metadata to show that. So
we need some choreographers. We need more choreographers in Wikibase to categorize all the gestures. So if you're out there, choreographers, Wikidata wants you.
Yesterday, we're trying to figure out whether the person was sitting in a lotus position or a half lotus position or something. So that's how specific we were trying to get with things like that. So someone mentioned that, yes, during upload, there are ways to get structured data in there. In fact, at one point, the default was to bring you to a screen that says, hey, we've got an AI system that suggests these things. Should I add them to the image? So I believe that's turned off now as optional, but that was one of the things that was being tried, right, John?
Yeah, I think like one thing for me around this is like, and I'm not sure how to describe this exactly, that this is like, once you start to get more statements in an image, it's like different people's perspectives on the same content. You bring in like a broad range of perspectives. I think that's super interesting. Like that you can have different ways of seeing the same thing. And maybe like through this, we can suggest to people different ways of seeing the same content they've not thought about before.
I mean, it's even like a neurology thing. Like, you know, when you're looking, it's not like a camera. You're looking at it like a video game version of the world, and you're seeing this and that, and you're ignoring that, and that could be based on your personal prejudice or your background or what you've seen before. And so, you know, getting a lot of different things, like what is in particular scene, like what is in the scene behind John right now, and you know what would pop out to different eyes could be an interesting way to develop some of this this structured data on commons.
Yeah, there's an interesting qualifier for depicts, which is determination method. And so Richard and I have been kind of toying around with this, like for example, the Met Museum has a bunch of things that they think are depicted. So do we add that and say determination method Met Museum, but then another either art historian or someone else might have a different way of determining what's in it, and we just add them all, but we kind of qualify them with determination method, you know, this type of thing, or that institution, or this viewpoint, which might be interesting to start breaking down more specifically these P180 statements.
Is this a dragon or a lizard, or is it a deity? you know, art historians differ.
Right. Like a religious scholar might see it different than an art historian, different than a biologist, right? Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah, it might help people kind of like help with interpretation of content as well. So I have a book of like medieval drawings, and what happens is people draw a rhino from a guy in a pub's description who met a guy who'd once seen a rhino for like 3 seconds in the wild.
Right.
So yeah, it's sometimes difficult to tell which animals they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Good point. All right, so some other cool things we can do. Sparkle query. So anyone who's ever done this with Wikidata knows it's very powerful. So we have the same capabilities with a beta site right now. This is a URL I rarely can remember correctly, so I bookmark it. WCQS, Wiki Commons Query Service -beta.wmflabs.org. Yikes. So make sure you visit it once and go back in history or find some shortcut to this, because it's almost impossible to remember. But very similar to what you have with Wikidata query. So it looks almost the same. I think a lot of people visit and go, wait a minute, is this the same or different? It's actually different. If you go to examples, we have examples here, but it's not as deep as with Wikidata right now. So we could definitely use more things here, but some of the interesting examples we have here are things like the map of files created by Commons users. You can actually do that with this query. And then show all the images that someone has taken on a map, which is kind of neat. And that's something you could not really do before you had structured data on Commons, right? So that is just taking the information from the coordinate information that's in the file and putting them on a map.
Could we do that with my username? Can we try that now? I wonder like where they're all coming from.
So what should we put here?
John_Cummings. Although I changed my username like 5 years ago, so maybe it's Mr. John Cummings or one word. We'll just try it like that and see if it works. I'd be really interested to. Oh no.
John_Cummings.
Yeah. That should, or like there's a space. I'm assuming there should be an underscore there. I'm sorry. Just try with a space. See if that works.
Okay. We're not getting much.
Maybe it's because I changed my username. That's when I went to Wikimania. That one.
Right.
Yeah. Try Mr. Mr. John Cummings or one word. That maybe we'll have more. All lowercase. I think it's all lowercase. I don't know if that matters.
It does. It absolutely does. Like that?
I think so. Maybe. Let's try that.
Oh, it's taking a long time. That's good. Oh yeah.
Okay, great.
Probably you. Look at that.
Okay.
Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I think so. There should be some in the US, and if there aren't those, I've forgotten to upload them on Commons, and I should do that.
I think there's a bot that's going around taking the EXIF data and then baking it into the structured data on Commons. But that's really neat, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think also maybe like 5 years ago, I didn't have a smartphone with GPS in. Maybe that's also my problem. Most of my photos are like a DSLR, so maybe that's why.
Right. This is absolutely correct here. It sounds scary, but no, you're absolutely right. Very few people write Sparkle queries from scratch. You always steal and copy from other people. And it's approved. It's approved.
Yeah, it's approved. Yeah, it's altruistic stealing.
We have a joke that, at least in Wikidata, right, almost everyone starts with the cat query. So if you go in here, the cat query is the first one. Everyone tries this, and then they customize it. And the number of chunks of code that still have the cats comment is astronomical because people forget the cat. So
I think it's an homage.
Beware! Yes, it's a salute to our cat.
Charitably determined as an homage rather than an accident.
So yeah, that's a joke in the Wikidata community is that almost every chunk of code has cat up there because people forget to remove it. So yeah, there's more you can do there. I encourage you to take a look at the examples there. We can maybe go to some other examples later on. But here's the problem is that we have got good querying. We're on a good way to go doing querying and searching, but our ingest and uploading is really not great right now, right? So our main tools for uploading files have really no structured data in Commons support. So you can upload the file, you can maybe do some stuff with wiki text and templating, but there's really no way to insert SDC content at upload time. You kind of need to upload it, get the MID, then do something else with another tool to bring in the structured data. Right?
Can we go back to that later on to kind of show how you go and find an MID and how you find MIDs in the category, and then like how do you use it in the query service? I'd be really interested to see that. Yeah,
that's a good question. We can show some examples. Make sure to remind me if we don't get to that, because Petscan is probably your friend there. But yeah, sometimes it's other tools that do a better job of that. But here's one tool that does do that, which is called Minefield, which I didn't even know about until recently because it's kind of not in the mainstream. But Minefield is a tool that takes a list of file names and turns them into the MIDs that you need to use with the tools that we're going to be talking about, right? So the problem is most people deal with file names like this, right? They say, okay, here's this. How do I turn a list of file names into the right MIDs without having to copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste? So the cool thing is, I think you go to Minefield here, and you can actually just give it a list of file names. And I can't remember whether file : should be at the beginning of it. Probably not. And let's do Marie Curie as well, just to give us another file. This is not the most efficient way of doing things. I'm just showing you an example. So once you have these, you can actually go in here and take go, and it'll dump out. Oh, maybe I do need the file. Okay, let's try again. Oops, sorry. I think I need the file at the beginning. Okay, there we go. So you can see that turns this into the MIDs, and then you can download the CSV file, the comma separated value, and then go into a spreadsheet or whatever tool to work with the MID. So this is one way of getting the MIDs in a bulk way. You can kind of paste in a gigantic list of names, right? The other thing you could do is use something like Petscan. So if anyone here has ever used Petscan, you can either give it a list of files or go to a category. So maybe Richard, maybe you can find us a not so enormous category in Commons of like met images or something we could take a look at and work off of that. But what you can do is basically work off Commons. I always forget this. Go to page properties, choose file, because almost everyone says, oh, I want to work with categories in Commons. You put the category in and nothing comes back. You need to go in here and say file. You put in a category, and then it'll bring back a list of the IDs for you. So that's another way to get the page IDs, also known as the MIDs for this, right? So that's another way to do it, is through Petscan. So those are kind of the two that I'd suggest for generating the MIDs. So let's go with that first. So Minefield is the tool that I would recommend for that, and then Petscan also does that. Once you have those MIDs, then you can feed it into a tool like quick statements. So quick statements is kind of our bread and butter tool for Wikidata that allows us to ingest statements, right? This image depicts Marie Curie, et cetera, et cetera. But it needs MIDs, right? So the same way that you're used to dealing with QIDs, in this example, you can see the M right there, P180, and then that is another, you know, your last part of it. So you do need to go and choose Commons batch mode only. Now, I think in the last 2 weeks, you do not need to be batch mode only, but I need confirmation from Magnus and folks like that. But you can actually go into quick statements. Go to quick statements here and say new batch. And you notice that here you need to choose Commons, right? So this is something that most people might forget. Choose Commons, and then you can go in and use your MID. So let's say I'm working on this one, Marie Curie. So here's my MID. Like I can either go here or I can go to concept URI right there. I'll just do it this since most people don't have my little tool there. I hit copy. I can paste that in there. Whoops, sorry, I need to copy the link. So I'm going to copy the link address. I'm going to come back here, and there's my MID right there, see? And then I can add a statement like P180. And then if I want to look into here, I can say female or woman. Okay, so there's the woman UID, and I can go in here and choose that. And this is just an example of a quick statement right there, right? So if I say import V1 commands right there, it should say, there we are. Look, it found the file name, right, from the MID, and it'll add a depicts woman statement there. Okay, now, I think before 2 weeks ago, you had to hit run in background. I believe now, we tried it the other day, you can hit run and it'll work. So let's try it out, run. All right, it works, I hope. So now let's go into Commons on this one and hit history. And you can hopefully see, there we are. That is the edit I just made with quick statements right there. Does everyone see that? Depicts woman, and then there's the batch number and everything, right? So that is a quick statements edit that was just made. And to my knowledge, hitting the run button instead of the run background button is a very new thing, as in the last week or two. But if someone in the chat knows better than I do, let me know. But we found that out by accident the other day when someone hit the run button and we said, oh, that doesn't work. And then it worked. So it works. All right. Anything else? Is that just a very basic use of quick statements, right?
Yeah, I think like one of the things that quick statements does, it allows, I guess, like the difference in quick statements and editing on the actual file itself is that with quick statements, you can add multiple things in one go.
Right.
Like it's kind of a batch thing. Could you show us how to do like more than one thing at once?
In quick statements?
Like maybe we can,
or other tools?
Yeah, with quick statements. Like just so that we can see the like code that you use to like, I don't know, say add the same statement to two other pictures of Marie Curie.
Yeah, I mean, so what you could do is, you know, if you had a tool like this where I generated a whole bunch of stuff, well, actually, let's go to Petscan and try that. So Richard, do you have a category we can use? Or?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to pick a fun one, sculptures and replicas of Trojan horse, which I created recently. And sculptures and replicas is normal, and Trojan horse is capitalized.
Can you put in the chat, and I'll
yeah,
in private, and I'll pick that up. So yeah, we can actually go in and find all the files in a category, and then let's go from there. So yes, so Richard has given me this category. There it is, sculptures and replicas of Trojan horse. And I believe we need to go in and put spaces in there, but make sure we have file there. Do it. Does it work? No, it just worked. Great. So did you check these? And what are these things? These are all depictions of a Trojan horse?
Yeah. They're all
cool.
There's apparently this like tradition of like people putting up their own Trojan horses around the world for various purposes. Some are political, some are historic. There were some several Euro politics related stuff.
Right.
I didn't quite understand, but yeah, there's a few at the site in Troy in Turkey, and there's a few other places.
Right. So you can see here, if I look at the structured data, it depicts nothing. There's no depiction statement here, which is kind of interesting, right? So what we can do is we can go in here and notice that this is Petscan, right? This is originally called CatScan to bring back stuff from categories, but it's so much more than that now. It's called Petscan. So I said Commons, Wikimedia, page properties file, and then brought back these 18 results. Now, this page ID is in fact the MID, which is without the M in front of it, right? So this is what gets us the IDs. So what I can do is I can actually go here and say, I want to output it in Petscan. And I can either say plain text or CSV. Let me go ahead and hit CSV, and it'll download it. And now I have a CSV file there. I don't know whether it's going to show up on the screen here, but I can go ahead and bring it in to a tool. Okay, so if we want to do this real quick, let's just say sheets.google.com. And then I'm just going to show you what I would typically do if I was doing it really fast. I can go ahead and say, let's import a file, and we're going to upload it. And I'm going to say it is this file that I just downloaded. It's on my desktop. And let's go ahead and import that data. So this is what I just downloaded from Petscan, and it's bringing it into Google Sheets. There it is. Does that make sense? So what I saw here was downloaded as a CSV file, and then now I have it in this spreadsheet. John, does that make sense so far?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So
one little tip, if you're less technical like me, if you use Google Sheets, it's available on the web, so you can ask other people for help with things that are difficult.
Exactly. That's a great thing about it. You can say, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me out and share the sheet with them, right? So here's what I normally do. Like if I don't care about those things, I don't care about this column. I'm going to delete this column. Now I got the page ID, but what I can do is I want to say, I want the MID, right? So there's my MID. I can go ahead and just say equals, and then I just happen to know you can concatenate the letter M with that cell, and boom, there be my MIDs. Does that make sense? So I just created my MIDs by simply putting an M in the front of that. Then what I can do is I can say P180 like that, right? If that's the property I want, I can fill it down. Oops, I don't want to fill it down like that. Copy. It tries to be too smart. I'm just going to paste like that. So I put P180 all the way down there, and then I'm going to go in here. And what is a Trojan horse? Let's go up here. So I'm going to say depicts Trojan horse. Does that make sense, Richard?
Yeah, let's just find the right Trojan horse.
Yeah, look at that. We have too many Trojan horses. Oh my God.
It's not.
We have the tail, but do we have an object?
I guess the tail might be appropriate for now. I mean, theoretically, there should be an object, but yeah, actually, maybe.
Yeah. Should we make the object?
Maybe.
That would be useful to make a Trojan horse object that is related to this tail. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not it's an instance of like, mythological sculpture rather than a tail, rather than methodology.
Exactly. I'll just use this for now, even though it's not probably the most correct thing to do, but I'll just at least say it, right? So I can go ahead and paste that in there, right? So there's my Q number for the Trojan horse. I can copy this and kind of copy down here if I want to do that. And then what I can do is make a new formula. I can say concatenate. I think the concatenate formula allows me to do more things with it. So I can concatenate. I want to concatenate this. And then the separator we use is a pipe character like that. Right? So I can say pipe. And I want the next thing, which is the P180. And then I also have another pipe character. There's other ways to do this. There's another CSV format. I'm just going to show you this one for simplicity. And then that. All right. So I'm going to autofill that. And now this set of statements are now ready to go into quick statements. So I can go in here and say, look at that. So I can now affect that depiction statement to all these different files. I can, oops, forgot to do this, right? It has to be commons.
And what would happen if one of these files already had that statement there? Like, let's say someone has gone along. Does it just say, oh, I won't add it because it's already there?
Typically, that's what it'll do. It'll just do a no-op when it sees there. Like, it'll say, oh, it's already there. But I don't know with this implementation of Commons whether it's going to duplicate or not. Interesting to see. But anyway, I'm going to avoid hitting the run button until we make the right Trojan horse object. But you can see what I did, right? And in fact, it has validated all the file names here. And it is saying, I'm going to add a depict statement, Trojan horse. And I've hit the run button. It would do exactly what I did with the other example.
So this is a nice error checking thing to make sure all the file names look good.
Right, right, exactly. Yep. And exactly. So that's something that was, that's something that builds on one's knowledge of quick statements, but we're using MIDs instead of QIDs. But there's a lot of little things that you can get wrong, right? Is that when you're in here, I still forget at times to make sure to pull this down and choose commons. That's easy to get wrong right there. Okay. But Petscan is very powerful for all these things. In a perfect world, we would be able to effect change right here. So when you bring back things from Wikidata, you can actually run quick statements right out of this box right up here. So in a perfect world, we would be able to just say, hey, these are commons files. Let me go ahead and do a P180. No, I'm sorry, the syntax is different. P180 colon. So the P180 colon, and then that. And then hit start, and that should work. It does not now. I tried it the other day. But in an ideal world, we would be able to just jump right into structured data and commons and do all these edits like that.
So you could pull up the category for Marie Curie and say, this is Marie Curie to all the photos. Right.
So you cannot do that right now with this, but we do have other tools that do that, right? So if we go to the commons, so let me show you a different way of doing the exact same thing. If we go to commons and we get to that category that Richard found, which is a nice one, which is the
sculptures and photos of Trojan horse.
Yeah, so if we're in this category here, we do have a way to affect change here, which I think I'm going to talk about next. Let's see. Yes, perfect timing. Okay, so we're in this category here. No, sorry, we're in this category here. And we have a tool called ACDC, which was done by Lucas Werkmeister, which is an awesome tool. Allows of mass editing SDC claims. You can also delete claims as well. And you enable it as a gadget. So if you go to Preferences, Gadgets, ACDC, turn it on, you now have an ACDC button here. And you can, let's copy that category name. You can say ACDC, and then you can actually say, let's load a category. And I'm already here, so we're in good shape, category. And it's going to load up all these files. And I can now just type in Trojan horse. There, KL from like that. Okay, so there we are. And if I hit publish changes, it'll go in and do exactly what I did with quick statements, which is a lot more user-friendly, right? Quick statements has more power if you want to do things like qualifiers and things like that. Although you can do that same thing here, but this is an easier way to do that, right? You can also remove statements. So you can actually specify exact statements to remove. This is a flag you need to enable manually in your preferences, but just know that you have the ability to remove statements as well if you turn on that feature, right? So ACDC is a great tool that's much more friendly in that area.
Can I ask one question here?
Mm-hmm.
So, as someone who is, how can I say this, less technically competent, where could I go if I accidentally added statements that was like the wrong Trojan horse? Can I go to somewhere on Commons and be like, hey, I just added photos, 300 photos of Marie Curie. I've said there's a Trojan horse in the photo. Where would I go on Commons to like get help with that? Is there a place?
That's a good question. I think the talk page on the Commons, the main Commons portal I had before, has some activity. And then there's another place for modeling. I think we'll show the page later on that there's a whole bunch of talk pages related to modeling of this stuff. But I think for structured on Commons, the main talk page for that portal is where things are happening. Right. So ACDC, again, works on files by name or categories that it can load. Now we actually have another tool called sd.js. So this is a script. So again, making things complicated. You can't turn this on in your preferences. You need to add this line to your common.js file in your Commons account. And this adds a tool that is kind of like Catalot, if you've used Catalot before. So notice down here in the lower right-hand corner, if you turn on Catalot, it's a great tool allowing you to adjust categories very quickly, right? But similar to that, there's a tool called sd.js. Now, here's where things get complicated. The position of that SDC tool is like the same one as Catalot, so it's kind of hard to find. I'm using my shortcut on my keyboard, Control-Opт-S, and that turns on SDC. That makes it a little complicated. Watch this, though. If I turn it off, you'll see the SDC button is there now. Does everyone see that in the lower right-hand corner right there? There's an SDC button there. But when I first load the page, you won't see it. It's hidden underneath Catalot. Yikes. So we need some user interface upgrades there. But if I hit Control-Option-S on my Mac, it'll bring up the tool. Now, once the tool is loaded, I can actually nicely see all the metadata for all these images, which is really cool. So Magnus's tool will load up all the structured data on Commons metadata and show that on my screen. You can see that this one has no SDC at all right there. And what I can do now is pick and choose by clicking, right? Or I can say all. I can choose all the files. I can say none of the files. Or I can choose like this one and this one and this one, and then toggle them, saying, let's do the inverse of what I just chose, right? Toggle, 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 like that, which is really nice. But let's say just for that one, I want to add, let's say for this one, these two, I want to say add depicts, and then I want to go ahead and say Trojan horse. Hail from the Trojan War. Hit the plus, the check box, and then if I click on this button down here, I will now add that P180 statement to that file. Does that make sense? So yet a third way of doing the same type of thing with the sd.js script. I'll just try it out and see what happens. Okay, that should have worked. Let's go ahead and click on contributions. And you'll see, here we go. Changed an entity, SDC added depicts Trojan horse to that file right there. Okay, so again, we have quick statements, ACDC, and now sd.js, which is a user script, which is super powerful and hopefully will be available as a gadget at some point. But right now, you need a special incantation to bring it up, and then you can pick and choose the items you want to work on.
There was a question about another mode, whether that enabling edit groups that might allow batch doing and undoing. I'm not sure if anyone knows about that, but
yeah, I don't know particularly, but that's a good question. If someone in the audience knows how to deal with mass undoing,
it could be helpful sometimes. We all make mistakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes 10,000 at a time.
Yeah. So I would probably do it through structured data. Query and then quick statements to undo my stuff. But that's only because I'm a Wikidata guy. So there might be better tools to mass undo a batch. I think the nice thing about quick statements is you can kind of track the batch number and then quickly undo the whole batch, right? So if we know the temporary batch number, there are ways to key off of that to mass undo, but not necessarily for SDC, right? There's no way to kind of trace that per se. unless you just kind of go through and just kind of hit the undo button on all these things. Yeah. All right. So we have, let's go back again. Quick statements. Number one, Wikidata friendly or Wikidata aware, or Wikidata and structured data and commons aware. Number two, ACDC, something you can enable through preferences. 3, SD.js or SDC tool.js, which is Magnus's tool that allows picking and plucking particular files. And then some other tools that are more like game-like or batch-oriented. So ISA is a tool that allows for campaigns. So anyone can kind of create a campaign or kind of an effort and put a whole bunch of file names into one campaign and then ask volunteers to go into the interface. And this is even mobile friendly. It's actually especially mobile friendly, right, John, to get people to help tag stuff.
Yeah, so my understanding of this was developed for Wiki Loves Africa, and there was a strong focus on making it a mobile interface. I think it's an amazing tool, and it's really like, I find it the easiest to use, and I think it's like, I feel like it's a really nice introduction. And it was set up originally for Wiki Loves Africa, but as you can see, that there's lots and lots of campaigns that use it now.
Like any other good tool in the wiki world, it is stolen by other efforts, and gratefully so.
Yeah, so you can, and the cool thing is anyone can create one, right? So you can go up there now and just make your own campaign, which I'm always a fan of. You don't need to ask for permission, just go do it. So there was one for Hack for OpenGlam. I'll just show you that one that we did very quickly, which is kind of cool. You can say get started, and it'll bring up an image and then give you the same kind of interface that you're used to seeing about adding to pick statements, right? So pretty neat to see this interface that if you put on a mobile is really nice and well designed for that. So yeah, it's a really nice tool for Wiki Loves Africa originally. All right, go ahead.
I think it could be used for, I could really see it being used for things like Wiki Loves Monuments or any other kind of large like collection of content with people with a kind of like, that has a special or like specific theme to it. I think it could be really interesting. So for instance, like you import a load of images about what happens if you import images from a collection from a museum, and then you ask like museum students to look at them. What could happen in a thing like that? I think it's a really interesting way of engaging people outside of the normal like Wikimedia kind of bubble.
Right. I think it's a great way, as you said, to not require like the heavy lift of an edit-a-thon and learning all of our ins and outs, just really fast to get involved. Yeah. I just want to make sure we brought up something that said is that the media search function also leverages structured data. So that's really cool to know, so that it tries to take your kind of free form search, but also integrate that into a structured search as well. So I'd love to learn more about how the logic in what goes on to map that across, but that's really great to see that it's not just one search or another search. They're actually kind of merging the functionalities together.
There might even be some fuzzy logic, which is always helpful and something we have a little bit of a deficit of in the wiki world.
Exactly. That's great to know.
Just one thing with that, Joe, if you could go into the like structured data on Commons page and on the talk page, if you write it down as an instruction, I'll make sure it's integrated into the main instructions for the search. That would be really great. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah.
Great.
There's a good question here. Is there some kind of regular analysis somewhere of the overall condition of information of Wikipedia or Wikidata? Overall condition is kind of hard to measure per se, but there are certain kind of dashboards that will track this stuff. Like there's the gender gap dashboard, which has been revived recently. It kind of shows you the state of bios, like biographies, gender gap wise, or by occupation, by birth date, things like that. John, what are some other things that you might know of, or Richard, about tracking the condition of?
You can track things like, like Wikidata by country. That's kind of interesting. Like, seeing like who are the biographies or the buildings by country and the completeness of them. So I've seen some good trackers like that. I mean, like it's like too big to have something that says this is good Wikipedia, this is bad Wikipedia, this is good Wikidata, this is bad Wikidata. But there are a lot of like the short answer is that there are 1,000 and more very individual projects, but there's not like one agreed upon wiki score of saying how good the project is doing or in particular area or not.
And there are tools that specifically work towards that. So there's is it called the Wikidata game, where you kind of it will say this person doesn't have a gender, and you can choose. I'm doing this because I use it on my phone. You can use things like with the Wikidata game to specifically target like.
Yeah, and of course that has some issues as well. Because we want to make sure that these things are properly documented. But seeing like what is complete and where it's complete is something that you can see at a large scale with even just like on a map, right? So it's nice to see on a map like show me museums or hospitals. I mean, we know that there are hospitals in every country in the world, but if you look at a map of Wikidata hospitals on Wikidata, you'll see very large parts of the world where there are hospitals, but they're not documented, or there are historic sites that they're not documented.
I'd love to see some stats on SDC because it's so new that we really don't have it. But I like showing these stats from Wikidata, which I think they're easier to measure because they're precise and they're structured, right? So these are slides mostly, I think, from Wikimedia Deutschland when they were presenting on Wikidata, and we haven't had an in real life Wikidata Con for a while. So sadly, we don't have more. But this is a great graph that kind of shows the rise in Wikidata edits per day. And I'm pretty sure for the last year or two, Wikidata has been the #1 project within the Wikimedia universe in terms of pure edits, right? But I love this illustration of 4 different maps showing you anything in Wikidata with a coordinate and how this has grown in the last 4 years, right? Well, not the last 4 years, but 4 snapshots. So this is October 2015, showing a bias towards like Europe and North America, items. But then as you go on, you can start to see, interestingly enough, this little spot in Africa is really lit up in 1 year, right? Then you go the next year, between 2016 2017, Asia and South America start to really light up. And then finally in 2018, wow, that's pretty impressive. So that was kind of a turning point year for a lot more information getting into Wikidata. And unfortunately, all the graphs that Adam Shoreland has done since then use a kind of a different metric, so they don't really map together well to show this progression. But I think this is already quite impressive to show the change in Wikidata from 2017 to 2018 in terms of how much is filled in since then. So that's just one measure to show some of that in Wikidata. So let's go back to SDC. Some other tools that now get to more specific stuff. There's a tool called Wikidata Image Positions, where you not only can you say it depicts a sheep, you can actually draw a bounding box around that, and it'll store that as a qualifier in the structured data on common statement, which is kind of cool, right? So this is a fun tool to play with if you want to go in and look at the specific positions of stuff. Let's see if I have an interesting item we can bring up here. Anyone have a favorite item we can take a look at here? So now this can operate on both Wikidata items and structured data on commons files, right? So that's important to note here. Like if you go by the Wikidata item, then it'll load that Wikidata item. And then you can see this is one I've worked on before. You can see that you can draw the bounding box for what is depicted there. And the same thing would happen if you typed in the file name right there, right? So this is just allowing you to specify the bounding boxes for that. This is another tool based on that, which is not only giving you the ability to draw a bounding box, but it actually has suggested depictions. So right now, this is kind of manually suggested, but it means that this tool is ready for AI to be plugged into it, so that this list of suggested depictions is not suggested by a human, but by an AI. And we already have some tools that are generating AI type recommendations. So this has got some promise of allowing people to add this in a way at scale using some AI assistance. All right, so what needs work then? We have those really cool tools. Well, The bad news is we don't actually have great tools for doing reporting and measurement, right? So there's a great tool that we use all the time, and I'll try to dig up an example while Richard describes it, called Listeria. So Listeria, what does Listeria do, Richard, for us?
It is a magical table that is generated from Wikidata, and sort of spits out your query and spits out any sort of any information about things that are, fit your query, and all the relevant properties of these items. So for example, we've used it a lot with artworks. You could say, give me a running list on a wiki page, on an actual wiki page, of all of the artworks by an artist, by all the artworks in a particular museum by, say, a woman artist, all of the artworks in a particular museum from the 19th century, any sort of query like that. And the nice thing about it is that it gets updated every day or whenever you want it to be. And it has the new information that's on Wikidata. Say if you add new information about what's depicted, about when it was created, about the genre it's in. And you can also use it for other things, like we've used it here in this example, the Embabble tool to start like little mini articles based on Wikidata. But you can also use it for all sorts of other things. And it's nice because it bridges the structured thing of Wikidata and the sort of wiki text, the texty thing that you can play with more directly of Wikipedia and things like that. So that's why I like it.
Yeah, good summary. So basically, we can generate these lists of all the stuff that Wikidata has on these Metropolitan Museum of Art objects simply with one Sparkle query, right? And then that will, how long does it refresh? Every week or so, Richard? Do you know?
I think it's every couple days or something, depending. And then you could also update it arbitrarily whenever you feel like it. Right.
So a bot comes around and then it makes the list. I think this is every 5 days or so, right? Depending on the period, or 10 days, it seems. It also depends on load on the server, right? But we don't need a daily report, just every 5 to 10 days. And that's what's really cool about it, is it generates these reports based off of Wikidata. Similarly, we do not have those kinds of tools right now for structured data on Commons, but it would be super useful to be able to generate regular reports like that. And then we also have a tool called Integrality, which kind of shows the completeness of content on Wikidata. And it would be nice to have that work with structured data on Commons as well, too.
Fiona has some tools to share. There isn't a dashboard, but you can get numbers. If you go to special search on Commons and do a search for has a WB statement, you can get the total number of, so that's pretty useful. And also how many things for depicts. So this is the germination of the tools that will appear and the tools that are there now. So that's very helpful. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Fiona. So Fiona is is the manager for GLAM initiatives at the Wikimedia Foundation. So thank you for joining us on that. And we've been a number of briefings and calls with the Wikimedia Foundation GLAM team on the progress of structured data on Commons. So it's been a good conversation to get as much information as we can about where SDC is right now. So Integrality is a tool that is like Listeria to generate reports on completeness of content in Wikidata and hopefully in the future on structured data on Commons. There's also a proposal to upgrade OpenRefine to be structured data on Commons friendly. So John, you want to talk a little bit about what OpenRefine is and what this prospect would mean?
Oh dear, I'm the worst person to ask. Richard, do you know more about this than me? I guess like the way that I would explain this is another tool to like mass import information into Commons and Wikidata.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, perhaps you could talk about the history of the tool, how it started, how it was more general purpose, then became sort of Wikidata-fied, and then now it's like expanding again.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. I mean, if you go to openrefine.org, it has a pretty good summary of what it is. It used to be a service called Google Refine, and as is the case with like 80% of what Google makes, it kind of discards it at the side of the road at some point. So, but it was super useful for data scientists and everything. So it was a service that allowed you to take your data set and says, here's my list of people, and there's their list of people, and how does my list of people match up with their list of people, and help you what we call reconcile the two sides. So this in data science or library science is called reconciliation. Like, how does my data line up with that data? And if you can match 90% of them, that's great, and I'll handle the leftover bits. So that's what OpenRefine does. It's a tool for cleaning data, matching data, and hopefully editing data. And right now, a lot of people use this with Wikidata to say that, here's my list of, Oscar Award winners. What are their corresponding Wikidata items? And sometimes that's easy, but as John said, sometimes it's hard if you're dealing with Vietnamese scientists, where almost all of them use the same last name and probably the first name. But you can say, match them by name first, then by birthday, then by place of birth, then maybe by ORCID ID, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what OpenRefine does. But hopefully in the future, OpenRefine will not only have the ability to match, but to also to edit the structured data uncommons once you find the match, to say, oh, that file corresponds to this. Let me add structured data uncommon statements to that file. Right? That's kind of the promise. And there is a grant proposal now, if you folks want to see it, on adding these functionalities to OpenRefine to be more SDC friendly. So that's something to take a look at there. Does that make sense as an explanation? Yeah. So it's kind of hard to describe without looking at the whole thing, but take a look at this. They've got a whole tutorial, and it basically looks like a super steroid-laden spreadsheet program. It's basically what it is. It's like a spreadsheet program that's network aware, that can probe and check against another database.
Okay. Can you just show the slide so that we can get the URL for the grant proposal? That'd be great.
Yes. So it is, if you look under just go to Meta Grants, and then they'll have a tab there that says Review Proposals. I think that's probably the best way to go. So if you go to I think you just go to Grants here. Yeah, if you go to Grants, then you go to Edit and Review Proposals right there. And then you can see not only that proposal, but a whole bunch of other ones. But you can actually go down here and look for OpenRefine, and it should be right there. Yep. And we've got some really experienced folks working on this right there. So highly recommend folks reading it over. And if you like it, endorse that. All right. So best practices. So like, if we know that these are things we can do and can't do, then where are we right now with best practices? This is the page I was talking about before in terms of discussions around modeling. So the comment that we had before, like, should you put Marie Curie is depicted and also a woman? Well, this is exactly where you talk about that as the best practices going forward. And again, there's no perfect answer to this at this point, but there are discussions happening. Basic metadata that is being put into this, I think this is a good best practice, which is trying to put the rights information in there. That's a good step that the bots can do at scale. So that's something you'll see quite a bit of, to see whether something is expired, public domain, CC0, and where that content comes from. Right? And another project like Sum of All Paintings is probably one of the more active projects using structured data uncommons and the depict statements, and worried about modeling and what's the right way to add statements to Wikidata and structured data uncommons. So if you're not familiar with it, you can go to Wikidata. It's called Wiki Project Sum of All Paintings. And we have maybe like a dozen or two folks are very active on trying to make a Wikidata item for every painting in the world, and making sure we have as many high resolution pictures of those paintings as you can find. So there's nearly 200,000 paintings on Wikidata that are illustrated with an image from Commons. And one of the big questions now is, if you have an image on Commons that has a corresponding Wikidata item, where do you put the depiction information? Do you remove it from the image and store it only on the Wikidata item, or do you keep it in both? And if you don't keep it in both, how do you find it through a query on Commons? That is a big question. So, John, I don't know if you have any views on that, or where you think things are with the idea of, if you search on a Commons, can you kind of, fall through to Wikidata to do the same search at the same time?
So I don't have a good answer for this. I have like opinions, but I don't think they're very informed. I think one of the things that I'd say around this is like, we need to have good quality discussions around structure of data, so that it is queryable in a kind of like predictable and like full way. So an example of where different data structures kind of makes things difficult is, I worked on a project with Wikimedia Sweden 2 years ago, I think now, and we were trying to bring data sets from governments and other organizations around different GLAMs in the world. So like we went to governments and said, give me all your list of libraries, all your lists of museums. And when we start to visualize this on Wikidata, we find like there were whole countries that were just black. There was no, like the maps you showed earlier that were glowing, there were countries with nothing in there. And we had to go in and look at that country and understand what was happening. It was just the data was modeled differently. And like without investigation and without that visualization, if you just went and did a query, you wouldn't know that was missing. You wouldn't know it was incomplete. And I think that's like incredibly important. Like if we're going to make Wikidata a resource for other people to use as well, this kind of like dependable and understandable structure is super important.
I think you're right. That's a great point. So let's take a look at some other things here. So I encourage you to look at some of our paintings. There's also a Telegram group where we're pretty active in discussing these things. Future. So John, tell us about the GLAM hack this week.
Yes, so this is organized by someone you might know, Bia Esterman. So this is the organized online. So it's 7 a.m. UTC on Friday until sometime Saturday afternoon. And we're kind of exploring like structured data on Commons, like how to play around with it. They've got some really interesting data sets they're offering us to they're offering for us to use. There's also like I work at UNESCO, and like we just released 2,000-ish images to play around with, adding structured data. They're really interesting. They're like heads of state or like important things that happened throughout the last 70 years. Really interesting. The event is free. It's on for 2 days. You can come for like half an hour to learn about something, or you can come for the whole time and play around. I really think like one of the things that we need to do with structured data on Commons is really create some like really understandable, really useful visualization of the data, like not theory, just the practice from like storytelling, like show, don't tell. I think it would be really helpful, like when we're talking to like, you know, all three of us work with GLAMs, like having things that people who aren't technical can understand will be super helpful. But yeah, on the page there's a sign up. It's running for like 2 full days. There's also lots of other things interesting that are happening. So if you get bored of structured data on Commons after 10 minutes, you can go and play with something else. Yeah. I have one other small request. So Fiona said before that there's like some 2 special things that you can do in search to find the number of statements that are depicts and the number of statements that are like have some kind of structured data. I'd really love it if someone could make a template that just showed the number. So on English Wikipedia, you have a template. I don't know what it's called. It's called like number of articles or something. You put that on a page and you put brackets around it, and then forever it will just show you the right number of articles on English Wikipedia and it will update itself. If we could have something like that for structured data, that would really help with the documentation. Like you can really show the success of structured data on Commons, the spread, and like when someone writes documentation and is talking about like how this is working, not having to manually update the numbers all the time would be really nice.
Yeah, and also like
so if there's any wizards out there that know how to do that, please.
A bot that would give like a congratulatory message every time you hit a new decimal point or something.
That'd be amazing. Like to actually give people positive feedback on like the growth, like show that their work is kind of appreciated and recognized would be like great. Be really nice.
So here's an example. I think she was saying that there's
so on there,
right?
Yeah. And you can also search for depicts. So I think it's about 4 million at the moment. So I think you just use the P and you don't give it a...
Oh, sorry, P180 like that. No?
No asterisk needed.
Oh, there we go. Okay, 4.4 million.
Let's get it to 5 million by the end of this broadcast. Come on, people.
Oops, sorry. P170. 1.5 million creators. Interesting.
I guess this shows the predominance of, photographs that users have made rather than artworks, which is reasonable.
I think that's correct. So if we go to the first one here and we go inspect the structured data, ooh, a lot of depiction. Good. So there's a creator, copyright status, Commons. Ooh, Commons quality assessment. That's interesting. Inception. Image captured with. That's an interesting property to look at. Coordinates of the point of view. That would be interesting to inspect too. So yeah, you're right, John. It'd be great to have some kind of dashboard that tracked these on a regular basis, wouldn't it? It would not be, I mean, it'd be very trivial to make a bot that at least once a day wrote into a wiki page that says, here's what I found, here's what I found. But yeah, it would be nice to have it live.
Step 1, log in. Step 2, do a computer science degree. Step 3, make the bot.
Not that bad, but yeah.
I forgot the grant funding.
That would be a very easy hackathon project to do. I mean,
and our hackathon is coming up in May, so.
No, there's a hackathon coming up this weekend.
It's this weekend, yes, this weekend too. Yeah, so that's an even easier one, or more immediate anyway.
So let's say image captured with. So this will show you the device used, right? So we can actually go back here and take a look at that. Okay, what's your guess?
Is there something we can look at, like not a camera? Can we look at like Hubble Space Telescope or like an electron microscope or something?
Yeah.
Can we do like depicts? Maybe this is a bit complex, but.
Well, we can do it with a query, I would think.
We do like depicts galaxy. I don't know. Not sure who's gone through all the astronomical images.
Minefield?
Could
maybe. I mean, maybe less biased toward visual images though.
Yeah.
This is always risky, but I'm going to try a live query here that says, let's do a histogram of devices used to capture stuff in.
Yeah, I wonder if that's just the stuff that's on the EXIF data or whatever, or whether it's been manually entered.
Right. That might be too big.
Hubble Space Telescope might be a little bit like, a little bit hard to find that one.
That's kind of a big ask. If we're coming back with how many are we coming back with? 26 million items, and then they're going to have to sort it and unique it. So that might be a little too big for this query.
Yeah.
We might have to do it with a smaller set like creator. I mean, that creator would be kind of interesting to see who's the #1 creator that we have listed in Wiki Commons. Okay, that's probably going to time out there. But we have the ability with a query that doesn't time out to actually figure out some of these interesting things on the basis there. Okay, so anything else we want to demo while we're waiting for that to come back? We said we have go ahead.
There were the things from earlier, so like showing how to use MIDs in queries.
Using MIDs in queries. So
like how you would use. So we talked about like the Commons query service based on the Wikidata query service. What are the kind of like bits you need? What are the ingredients you need to use kind of like common stuff in a query service? So like like MIDs, and you showed how to get the MIDs for a category, but how would you like practically use that in a query on the query service?
Yeah, so you could specify if you're interested in a particular MID, you could do that. Let me see actually what happens if we do that.
There must be some property for like alternate versions of the same photo or something like that, or
right. I'm trying to think of what we could do that could show that off. Let's see if we have a depicts house cat.
Maybe that's not a great example. I guess what I'm trying to think about is like, what are the main uses of this query service at the moment? Like maybe we can just go through some of the examples that are there to show like interesting things are.
So, the examples that they have here are things like for artworks. And then the subclasses one is kind of interesting here. So this is showing you not just a keyword match of anything, but actually showing you subclasses, right? So for anyone who is familiar with Wikidata, this is kind of the magic that Wikidata gives you, is you're not just doing a show me all roses, but if you put in something that is a type of rose, then that straight search will not come up with the right thing. But the magic of Wikidata is it understands subclasses, right? So it says, show me not only roses, but all the different types of roses. And that's where this magic of WDT-P279, which means the subclasses, if I put that, right? So this is show me instances and subclasses of roses. And that's the power of what you can do with structured data versus just lexical matching of the word roses.
Yeah, because we don't, we are rose specialists. We're not going to use this Philistine approach of just calling it a rose. We're going to get the very specific type of rose.
Yeah, exactly.
We're floral specialists.
But here's the question mark long term. Well, short term and long term is how many Commons people know how to do this? Not that many, which is why the guidance right now is for now, say depicts woman and depicts Marie Curie, because a Wikidatan would say, how do I find all women? I would find, named people who are women, but I can do that with a query. But the average Commons person may not understand as much about Sparkle to get that query, right? So they might be searching for woman and only women. And that's why putting both of those depiction statements enhances discoverability, but it's not necessarily best practice for categorization, right? To be exhaustive in listing all those things. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we kind of have practicality as a priority right now. And then long term, if there's a user interface that allows people to more readily access the instance or subclass of, or what Martin Dammers said, if we have better faceted search, then we can make a very general query, then start to carve it down into more and more specific things. But we don't really have that faceted search capability in Commons.
You want to support both the rose occasional enthusiast and the rose connoisseur.
Right.
Yeah. I guess the way that I'm thinking about this in terms of like how it's supported in the documentation is it's moving from something that's purely in development to something that is both in development and in use. It's a kind of end user thing, but it's also like a thing that's kind of growing and getting new arms and legs and different things it can do.
And you can be a part of it. This is time to get on the ground level. Wikibase is only growing.
Yeah, I just chose an interesting query here that just tries to find the most common predicates, which is like the properties, right, of a sample of 5,000 Commons files. Is that the only real way you can do this is to sample and not to look at the entire corpus of Wikimedia Commons. But even then, it's taking a while to come back. So it's using this select with a limit of 5,000 and then going through here and trying to do some reports here. So you can see that these are the most common things. You'll see this makes sense that copyright license is the most used property because we have a bot that goes through and just churns through and does that. Copyright status, inception, right? So the date that was created. Depicts is up there as well. So in a sample of 5,615 have it depicts. Creator, source of file is also widely used. Image captured with, interesting.
I guess that comes from the metadata. I think that comes from the I don't know what it's called, the metadata the camera captures.
Yeah, like the exit or whatever else they call it.
Yeah, it was probably a bot going through there taking the EXIF.
I wonder, what do all these NASA images have for the EXIF data? Do they have do they say the name of the scientific instrument or not?
Yeah.
Or is it just something that someone used to edit along the way?
Right. Alex here says there's an example that explained the 279. If you have an example of that, that'd be great. I know of some tutorials in Wikidata that show that, but if there's one that's friendly to Commons users, that would be kind of neat to have a nice compact intro to instance of versus subclass. It can get very confusing for a lot of folks starting off in this area. Yeah. But this is kind of interesting to see. This is kind of what I expected, but it's interesting. Oh, look at this. They even have OTRS ticket number as one of the more widely used ones. So for folks who don't know, this is basically a reference to when someone sends, when the permission about a file is in question, people can email OTRS to register, like, this is my file and I do release it. And this is a way to track exactly who sent an email and granting what permission. So it's kind of interesting that this is up there. It makes sense that it is baked into the structured data and commons, but I didn't realize it was used to this extent.
One like query that I'd love to try, and I don't really know a good institution to do it with. Some kind of category of photographs from around the world, like someone who's documenting photos around the world, and to put that onto a map and really show distribution. That would be super interesting. There's a guy, I don't remember his name, I think it's Diego Delso. I think might be his name. Like, just like beautiful photos on Commons, like they're always amazing. That would be super interesting to look at.
Interesting. This is an interesting query. This is everything taken 1 kilometer around a certain point. I believe this is Alexandria, Egypt, because we had Wikimedia there, and this kind of reminds me of that trip. So we actually had beers right there for Wikimedia, right in the middle there, which was not easy to find in Egypt. So let's see if we can go back here and see what the image grid might look like for this. Yeah, there we are. So there we are, Alexandria.
And it includes like reconstructed historical structures.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
That's interesting. That's the source of my username. It's Pharos of Alexandria.
Exactly. Yes, that's right. That's true. This is you right there. Nice portrait.
Self-portrait.
But this is interesting. That's got like these diagrams, which I'm not sure should be included. So,
to me, this points to something that's like a really strong argument for organizations sharing their content on Commons, which is like, we now have these really interesting analytical tools that would cost quite a lot of money to develop, that like you can just use. And once we've got good instructions, they're fairly easy to use. I think that's a really strong kind of like argument for working with GLAMs, is that we have these strong tools. And also you can bring in other people's content as well. Like, you can show your work in context.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, actually, Richard, this is actually the lighthouse of Alexandria was the center point. So
okay. Oh, that's nice.
It's actually the lighthouse, not some random point. So
I mean, I didn't even know the location. I guess they know the approximate location.
Any other point you're interested in, John? Let's see. I'm assuming the ones that are near Wikimania are going to be very, very, very well covered, which is typical of like Wikimedians documenting something quite well.
Apparently, the Eiffel Tower in Paris is the most photographed thing in the world.
Oh, that's true.
Can we try the Eiffel Tower and see how many photos of the Eiffel Tower we have?
Are you ready for how much it's going to come back? So.
Oh, and Eiffel, I think the issue, remember the classic issue of the Eiffel Tower is that it's not copyrighted during the day, but it's copyrighted at night.
Right.
So maybe
wow.
I'm sure there could be a structured data, with a faceted search to find the photos taken during the day and during the night, and maybe we have to speed label the night ones because they're all copyrighted.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good point.
That's amazing.
That's pretty cool, right? So you can see the density of photos. Like, this is right underneath. Like, a lot of people probably took it straight up, right, from underneath it there.
And I like, because I used to work just next door to that. Like, I can see the ones that are taken on the overground, on the metro. I can tell which ones are like taken on boat.
Right, the boats.
yeah, they're the boats. And then if you go slightly down and to the left, you've got the metro line.
Right.
So all those on there are there's the metro line somewhere around there. Yeah, amazing.
That's so neat. And then the Trocadero, yeah, all folks hang out there. What is this one though? Like, I'm kind of surprised. Like, why are there so many here? That's kind of odd, isn't it?
Maybe it's a footbridge that isn't on the thing.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, it could be a bridge or a little.
Anything? Let's see. Anyone else?
What about the blank spots? Are those like non-tourist areas, or?
I know. Or maybe they're military. Like,
Yeah.
Actually, that's true. The Col Militaire, which is the military training base, is around there somewhere.
Right. Yeah, here. Around here, right?
That's the hospital. That's why am I giving people a tour of Paris? This is really funny. That's Napoleon's tomb.
Who wouldn't want a tour of Paris? I mean, come on.
Or these are like low-rise buildings with no view of the Eiffel Tower, right? So that's why you can't get one here.
Yeah, it's a lot of military stuff around there, so I guess that's why.
Any other favorite places to check out? Let's see. What would be very interesting to should be a dead zone here around the White House, where very few people can get to. Right. So, wow, that's pretty well covered. But even then, you have a lot of pictures from the heart of things there. Isn't it? But this might be like press photographers that actually have official access there, right? So. But you could actually, by weird crowdsourcing, figure out what are the most secure locations around the White House by the lack of photos there, right?
I think we should stop this before the stream is mysteriously disconnected.
Wait, there's a knock at my door right now. What's going on?
One thing that I'd love to do with this is with timelines to show things like glacier melt over time and how kind of locations change over time. I think that would be super interesting to see.
We have to bring Commons into the fourth dimension.
Yeah.
I love some of these. That's why I love talking to Wikimedians. Like, you've got the best ideas. Like, can you compare that to depicts Eiffel Tower query? Like, that's a good point, you know. And then think about the field of view. Like, this is using coordinates of the point of view, which is basically where the photographer was standing, right? That's what we're getting with the EXIF GPS data.
Wow, we should. I mean, is there like I imagine there's some sort of effort to have like the point of view of paintings, like all the paintings of the Eiffel Tower. Where was it taken from? I'm sure that could be like. I'm sure people have done some stuff with it, but it would be kind of funny if there was a way to figure it out in like a mass scale for Commons.
Yeah.
Right.
I would really love to see. So for like collections from museums, what is the country of origin, to see a map of where the things came from.
Right.
That would be super interesting.
It's one of the underused properties on Wikidata. You know, I mean, you can get some of it from the artist, but yeah, it's an important property.
Now, this is interesting. I'm trying to find the volcano that just erupted in St. Vincent, but how come we're not getting any coordinate location around it? We're not. Oh, no, here we are.
So there's no photos?
I don't know. Or maybe there's none with that have been tagged with SDC yet. Because they're very new. They're very new photos that we have. So we do have well, maybe we can help. We can help out with that. So this is what we find with the category St. Vincent here. If we want to check out what we have there, we can actually use the SD tool here and see. Yeah, no SDC, no SDC, no SDC. It's actually a lot, not much structured data wise.
This is something we're going to play around with on the weekend. Is like, can we think of a cool query? What extra data do we need to add to Commons? And then like we'll get the database refreshed in structured data Commons, and then we're just trying to think of like if anyone in the chat has some really interesting ideas of stuff we could play around related to GLAMs on the weekend, that would be really appreciated. We have a few ideas, but
Oh, bummer. We got a nomination for deletion on this one. It's one of the rare pictures we have of that.
Yeah, it might be taken from somewhere else, taken from Twitter, or whatever.
Or the only one we really have that's free is a satellite photo. And I don't even know if that's free. It is, let's see. Okay, we do have that. So this is the image that I found. So this is the satellite photo. Currently protecting only edit administrators. Structured data, let's see what we have. Depicts no coordinate information. No geolocation information. Is there anything in the EXIF? There's no EXIF. Oh, there is. But no. Well, according to the point of view is like directly up in the air or from space. So I'm not sure that's going to help us here, but that's interesting. So yeah, we basically have no media with the coordinates of the point of view baked into it that would be useful for this query. That's why we're getting this.
Can you guys talk about like the Met Museum and how you think this could be used with them? Like, what are your kind of like ideas around this?
For the museum, you said?
Yeah. Just like you guys have got a huge amount of content available and like you know how to do all this stuff. What are your kind of ideas around like things that would be really interesting to do with the content?
I guess the things that I've been thinking of. Well, first that, I mean, of course, it's artwork. So, and a lot of the data should be on Wikidata, or you should start on Wikidata, and it would involve copying things over, perhaps, to Commons, and perhaps copying them 2 ways. And also something that could be really interesting that we haven't done is thinking about different photographs of the same type of work of art. We have a lot of photographs from the Met, like taken over like decades. So like there's a photo from 1910 of the work of art. There's a photo from 1950, 1970, and from yesterday. And how do those, compare? Which ones are in color? What's the resolution? Do they come from like slides? What angle were they taken from? And finding a way to document that on Commons would be interesting, as well as sorting through all of the depictions of things and topics that are shared and artists that are shared among different works and in the collection, different collections. Yeah, and there's also someone mentioned restoring the painting. So obviously, sometimes the photograph was taken before the painting was restored, sometimes after. So that's, there's also damage or just there was wear.
I think one of the things that I'd really be interested to see is like an example query is like looking at if you had all the paintings from a specific painter in Wikidata, you could visualize how prolific the painter was over their lifetime, like which of the paintings, and obviously like not all the paintings go in Wikidata, but that someone produces over their life. But it'd be really interesting to see like how that works, and also to like to enhance that with like the pictures from Commons and which have Wikipedia articles and things like that. I think that'd be really interesting. If you've not heard of it before, I know you two guys probably have. There's an amazing tool called Historypedia, which uses Wikidata to like visualize stuff in timelines. It's really amazing. I know the guy who made it, and I was in the pub with him before he made it, and he spoke about it, and I went, that sounds amazing, but also impossible. And then I met him like a year later, and he's like, okay, it's finished. It's done. You can play with it. It was amazing.
It's probably mostly done because he said it was impossible. And that was, that's no greater motivator than that.
Oh, no.
So I think he owes you a pint.
Yeah, if you've never seen it, Historypedia is really cool. And it's like it's even more advanced than what you can do with Wikidata query because it can do all kinds of nice reconfiguration of stuff and everything.
Yeah, and they've really deeply thought about different kinds of things around, like if you want to show 10,000 things in one timeline, how do you prioritize things? How do you like let the user prioritize things? And one thing about things like timelines and visualization that I found before, especially with maps, like you can see errors very clearly in a way that you couldn't do if you were just looking at the thing.
Yeah, I remember when I was looking at a Wikidata map of battles, like historical battles, and one was like all the way in the South Indian Ocean. And I realized they got the latitude wrong. They used like negative latitude instead of pods. I mean, sometimes you just notice things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, using spatial domain to find obvious problems with the data. Yeah, I like that. Great. Well, is there anything else we can demo, John, that would be useful? Otherwise, I think we've done a nice job of showing some examples. This is I just put this in for giggles. This is a map of all the images taken within 1,000 kilometers or 1,000 meters of the Met Museum. So obviously, New York is very dense, so it's not just the Met Museum, but I thought this was quite interesting, Richard. What do you make of this? This is the education entrance of the Met.
It looks like the people who come in for education take a lot of photos.
Yeah,
exactly. More than the people who come in for the regular entrance. So that's good. I mean, I think that could help justify that department's budget.
Exactly. Give this as a picture to the visitor services of the Met. They'd be like, "What? That's really interesting."
Yeah.
I wonder if that might actually come from some of the editathons, because some of our people who come in from editathons coming through that entrance, and they tend to take more pictures, and they tend to be much more likely to put them on Commons and to use structured data on Commons. So
that's true, and and also it's interesting. This is the Greco-Roman part, right?
Yes.
The other side is the Egyptian. So, for whatever reason, the entrance, which is right down here, which is where students and groups would go in. Maybe they're waiting in line and they're just taking goofy photos or something. And then you go in here. This is the Greco-Roman area, so there's more photos there.
I mean, the Greco-Roman area is also displayed in a sort of interesting way. So it has some advantages over the like just showing one individual artwork. You can see like multiple artworks in a way,
right.
And I guess that's a sort of different museum display traditions.
Right.
So one of the things that I'd be really interested to know with this is if there are ways. So we've talked about things like working across languages. We've talked about things around being able to analyze content. I wonder if there are ways to explore. How can I put this? So Britain had an empire for quite a long time. And some of the things from around the empire found themselves into British museums. Maybe they shouldn't have been there, or they were like taken under like not great circumstances. And there's a lot of work around like decolonizing the work in museums all over the world. Britain being an example of kind of a country where this is a big problem. I wonder if there are tools around structured data on Commons and Wikidata to like help with that work, like provide analysis, but also like across languages. And I feel like there's something in there and I don't quite know what it is yet, but like also with different, how do I say this, interpretations across time. So there are descriptions of objects and people from like the 1930s that people would be very uncomfortable using now. But it's important to have that in like a historical context to like say, this was how people used to talk about people like that. Yeah, this isn't my area, but I feel like there's
or even like, something as seemingly innocuous as what department does this work of art go into? Does this go into the art department or does this go into the anthropology department? And a lot of things like that. Could be interesting to trace over time and useful.
Yeah, and one of the things we know that Wikidata and Wikibase or RDF databases in general are not great on is time series data, right? You're trying to track something over time, then you're starting to fit a square peg in a round hole when it comes to Wikidata or RDF data. So that is something that when we were at the last Wikidata Con, that was an explicit question, like, how is Wikidata going to do better with time series data? And the answer is pretty much, it doesn't do well, and we don't plan to really do well. And it's not necessarily a knock on Wikidata, it's just that that's not what RDF databases do, the type of databases that store relationships and entities like that. So that is going to be an interesting question going forward. Like, how do you have meaningful ways to, as you said, kind of track how the models have changed over time? And sometimes we really struggle to capture that in Wikidata with qualifiers and start time, end time, things like that. It's still kind of clunky, right? Richard, you've done more of that than I have in terms of trying to say, this statement is preferred, this one's deprecated, this is start time, end time. It seems like we're still trying to use it in an unnatural way.
Yeah, and most of the things don't, like things like Listeria don't necessarily take the centuries properly. Sometimes it interprets a century as a millennium or vice versa. So there's still some room for expansion there. And obviously there are, vastly varying, data attributions on a number of items, especially like archaeological type items. And there's no super way to resolve that. But
Right.
we sort of try to find like, this is the best estimated date, and this is the range, and maybe also this is the secondary estimated date, and that's that range. And it's definitely an area with room for development.
Right. I mean, the very practical example that bends my brain, because I used to do this as a real project, was the Pulitzer Prizes. So I back in 1995, I was the first one to take the Pulitzer Prizes database, which, believe it or not, was just like a I hate to say like a Word document. Like, it wasn't a database. So to try to turn it into a database, but it was very hard because the Pulitzer Prizes, I think, start off with 4 awards back in 1917, I think it was. And it's expanded, category split. They re-merged. One of the categories for reporting and journalism was called telegraphic reporting, when the telegraph was, the new thing. And then they wound up like ditching the telegraph label later on, and they call it like telephonic. But then telephonic doesn't make sense either. There's no more telephonic or telegraphic. And then you're kind of like, well, is this new prize different than that, or just a relabeled version of that? And I couldn't even get the right answer from the people who had all the knowledge. They're like, well, we're not sure. It could be that this prize we have today is relabeled a version of the old one, but it's also reasonable to say it's a completely different prize. I'm like,
and now is it the microblogging prize?
Yeah. So I was like, as a data science guy, how am I going to figure this out? You don't even know, as the experts, how to say whether it's a successor to this prize or it's a split of a previous prize. So those things Wikidata is really not good at, right? If you want to say, like, how many prizes did the Pulitzers give out in 1921? You're like, I don't know, because you need to peer into the qualifiers and what was the name at this span. If anyone knows how to do that well, please give me a call, because I don't know how to do that in a query. To just say, in 1943, how many Pulitzer Prizes were given out based on the names and the evolution of those prizes. It's not easy to do. And even worse, what were the names of the prizes at the time? No, it's not good. Yeah, Brian's saying Nobel's the same. Like, anyone dealing with prizes knows exactly what this problem is of, prizes evolving over time, and whether they're splits or merges or relabeled versions.
Whoever figures this out will get a Nobel Prize themselves.
I would give it to them. Yeah. All right. So thanks for these. Let's just take a look at the last questions just to make sure we are putting the right ones out there. I'm sure there are many other questions, but how much knowledge of Wikidata modeling is needed to be an SDC user? That was one of the things we brought up several times, right? Can we reasonably expect someone to say, oh, if I'm looking for all women in Wikimedia Commons, you can't just look for women. You need to do this P31279 star thing. And they're like, I don't know what that is, right? So what's the user interface we give to folks to do the right searches to get the results they're expecting? That's not trivial. How is data modeling determined or even discussed? John, you asked the right question. Like, where is this being discussed? Well, there's 3 different talk pages, so go check them. There's no real central decision-making in all of this. And some of it is also whoever got there first and put their biggest footprint on it. That's kind of what we're going with, right? That's also.
And this is a huge problem. Like, most people who contribute to Wikipedia are from Europe and North America. Like, we are structuring things in a very like Euro and North American centric way. One of the things that I worked on recently is I created a space on Wikidata to discuss schemas. So if you just go to like Wikidata schemas, you can find a place there and like store these kind of community discussions, like have a central place to discuss these things. Because otherwise they happen on Project Chat like 25 times and then they just get archived and it happens the 26th time. Yeah, I feel like
and often
this is something we need to fix.
And often the primary clash on Wikidata is between the North American viewpoint and the Western European viewpoint, and they're actually quite different on some issues. And obviously that leaves out the majority of the world, which should be represented as well, and figuring out and having that larger conversation, which is very important.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then faceted search, right? This is the idea that if you do kind of an initial search, you can kind of refine the search by anyone who's done like an Amazon search knows what this is. Like if you say, let me look for sporting equipment, and then the left-hand side says, are you looking for camping, outdoors, blah, blah, blah. And you can kind of keep clicking on things to narrow. And we don't really have that kind of capability right now with any of our search functions that I know of. So having that capability to kind of keep boiling down the search criteria and then generating a meaningful way to capture that later on is useful to have. And then how our search and query going to interact over time. That's a great example from Seddon that at least there's some kind of fuzzy merging of those two methods of, kind of colloquial, what people are expecting out of a Google search-like syntax versus the precision of a Wikidata query or a SDC query, and how can we make those easier for people to access? Yeah.
Because the quality of the content, like, it's easy to forget we have the largest collection of like monuments in the world. Like, there's been big organizations trying to do the stuff that like Wikimedia just sort of does a little bit by accident. Like, it has this photo competition, and then like on the side it makes the largest database of like monuments in the world as like a way to get to the photos. I think like there's so much useful data now, and like genuinely useful for so many reasons. It's just like you can't really use it very well unless you're like have a lot of experience.
Yeah, that's right. But then I think something we didn't put on this list also is something that folks brought up in the chat, which is how good is your data set, or how clean is it? How complete is it? That's always in the back of everyone's mind, right? Like, you do a query, you get a result, like, oh, that's interesting. Well, did you check to see how complete the data set is, or how clean it is, or if the model matches what you're expecting? So that's also something that's hard to figure out too. Yeah. Great. Oh, this is also a good comment here. Sparkle requires a lot of practice. It's true. That's why I have a lot of like shorthand. I have a lot of search Wikidata Sparkle snippets just in my own library, and I just kind of drag them out like Lego bricks because I can never really remember how to do those things from scratch, like histograms and federated search. I could never remember how to rewrite them, so you need to just take snippets from other folks all the time. Yeah. All right, so another great thing that you can read is Structured Data on Commons and GLAM, Open Questions and Fresh Challenges. This is a great post by Sandra Faulknier, who's been working on this for a long time. And so take a look at that. Even though it was last year, it gives a pretty good overview of the types of things we're talking about here, right? Like, how do we describe things in Wikidata versus Structured Data on Commons, and how do we kind of reconcile the different ways of modeling things? So definitely recommend you take a look at that if you're interested in any of these topics here on the Diff blog run by the foundation. Susan says, you like the Sparkle Lego concept. I do too. I think there could be a nice visual way to do Sparkle queries that goes beyond the Sparkle, the Wikidata query interface as it is now. So yeah, be interested to try that out.
Nice sparkling bricks.
Yeah, Sparkle bricks. All right. So, John, hope this has been useful. Tell us a little bit. You're trying to reach a lot of GLAM institutions with more SDC comments or commentary, right? So,
Yeah, so just trying to let a lot of GLAMs know about what SDC is and how it might be useful for them, and like the value of sharing content on Commons. Yeah, I really want to make something that is usable by other people, so it's not just me doing a presentation and then it gets lost somewhere. Like really try and make the structured on Commons pages usable by both Wikimedia contributors, and also if you work for a GLAM or someone else with content, you can go there and go, okay, this is something I understand. This is this I see the value of. Let's do something with this.
Right. This is last few comments here. No offense, but finding this stuff on Wikiborg is not the easiest thing. It's not only not the easiest thing, it's really hard. So I completely agree with you. That's one reason why we tried to do this slide deck, to try to assemble as much as we could into one place. And I'm a big fan of trying to do, one pagers and one page summaries of things. So I think it does make sense to do a SDC one pager. What do you think, Richard? We have a one pager for Wikidata.
Yeah, it's just eventually we'll have like the book of 1 pages, and that'll be everything.
Yeah, I don't know why we don't have that. That's a good question.
Just a little handbook, and you just hand it out, and everyone understands everything.
Yeah, like I create this Wikidata in one page for Wikidata, but I don't know why I haven't thought about this for Wikidata, for Wiki Commons query, Wiki Commons. So that's not a bad idea. So this is kind of like a one-page guide to Wikidata, but we could do the same thing for SDC. But the problem is it's changing so fast that it'd be hard to keep up to date, but there's no reason why people couldn't group edit that. So this one is done on Google Draw, and people translate to other languages. There's no reason why we couldn't have that just open to more people.
I've just seen a comment from Brian. So much of what, where is it? It's around journalism students. Next one up, yeah. I have this idea for something that is a tool for journalists that uses Wikidata that is like, so there's a problem in the media in terms of like representation of women. So I think it's like what only the UNESCO did a study a few years ago that I don't remember the exact numbers for, but only about 1 in 5 experts are interviewed in the media are women. I would really love to create some kind of resource for journalists where they could go and say, okay, I want an expert who's a woman on this topic. Because the experts exist, they're just not well covered, so that journalists don't find them, so they're not well covered, and there's a problem more and more, and then they can't be in Wikipedia because they have no media coverage. I really want to kind of like, yeah, of course. I just saw the next comment, but like, if anyone has any ideas of like using Wikidata as a research tool for journalists or other people, that'd be amazing.
I know there's been, there's been some work. I think it's called Sight Unseen, where people have done some analysis. Like Kevin Pyravi, I think, and some others have done an analysis of what sources are used in Wikipedia articles, and are they from reliable sources or not. I'm also like looking at gender representation of like say experts that are cited in Wikipedia articles, as well as in just general publications. Might be an interesting extension of that kind of work.
Right.
Interesting you mentioned that, because we actually have a project now called Women Do News. So it's actually a group of women journalists who are trying to do what Women in Red is doing, with making sure there's more biographies of women journalists, and I've been helping to advise some of what they're doing. So this might be interesting to see. If you look at womendonews.org, they have editathons, and they've been trying to do like work lists. I didn't even realize they put this up there, but I just made a quick visualization for them for all the women they've added to Wikidata and to Wikipedia. And you can actually see all of that in this view here. It's kind of nuts, but it basically shows all the women they've added through their efforts, and including their occupation and their publication or their employer, I think it is. So it's kind of cool just to kind of see, obviously journalist is at the center of this thing, but you actually have some folks who are academics or activists, and it's kind of neat to see what are the different institutions or places of employment that have been the focus here. So I don't know if anything jumps out at you, but it looks like things like the Washington Post is pretty big here. Trying to see what else is going on here. University of Florida? No, it's probably a little outlier there. Guardian, Associated Press, USA Today, New York Times, obviously is a big one here. So it's kind of interesting. So there's a educated at, which is the green circle. Their occupation is the yellow circle. And then their publication or employer is the purple circle. BuzzFeed. So it's a little busy, but still kind of fun to look at.
Okay.
All right. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching us. We went on a little bit longer than we thought, but it sounds like the conversation was interesting to folks. So we wanted to make sure we showed everything that we know. But, you know, these things are changing quickly, right, John? So we want to try to document as much as possible. Where were you thinking of trying to put all of the stuff that we covered today in one place, right?
So just the main structured data on Commons page on Commons. So it's like Commons : structured data or something similar to that. Maybe you can show the page now. But yeah, if you have any thoughts or like anything that we should show or like know anything, please put on the discussion page. I'll find a home for it. We're really gonna like think about both what knowledge should be there, but also like what is the priority of knowledge for different audiences, and really try and find like different audiences in different tabs and stuff. Yeah.
Right. And I at least have been trying to update this navigation box at the bottom here. So until I added it, we did not have image annotator or query service down here. So I'm not sure why they weren't there. So I'm going to try to keep this box updated as much as possible, because this is almost like a 10,000 foot view of where we are with the tools and the about pages and everything. So yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I look forward to seeing the hackathon and its results.
Yeah, please. Maybe what we can do is, I don't know whether, John, you may have a better idea. Is there an ongoing chat for the hackathon, or do we repurpose one of the existing GLAM channels we have for the Wikimedia community?
So do you mean the hackathon this weekend? They've got like a Slack running for it. Right. But I can always report back on the talk page for Structured Data on Commons about what we did. And I also want to, like, if we created any cool visualizations, show them on the main page, things like that. I'd really love some ideas about, like, when the Wikimedia hackathon's happening, like what we can do around this at Wikimedia hackathon. Yeah.
So again, this is the one.
Where's the someone asked in the chat, where's the link for the hackathon this weekend? Here, 2021, and then you can get there, then get to the Slack channel and everything else from there.
Yeah, you just click on registration, it will give you all the information.
Okay, great. So, but I think maybe for other folks, if they're not familiar, we do have some pretty active Telegram channels for our community. So there is a Commons one, right? That's probably the most relevant to what we're doing, John. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think Wikimedia Commons Community is the name of the Telegram channel, and I will quickly see if there's a shortcut to it, because I'm not sure. Invite to group by a link. Oh, there's no beautiful link to this, so I will just put that in our little thing there. If YouTube is okay with it, I'll say that is the Commons Community Telegram. If you go to that, t.me/join chat, and then that will go and get you to the Telegram group, which is pretty active and does have discussions about SDC. All right. So thanks again, John. Thanks again, Richard.
Thanks
Hope to see you at the hackathon. And if there's makes sense to do another episode soon, we'll do that as well.
Great.
Okay, so thanks everyone, and appreciate the participation, and hope to see you. I see some folks are joining the Commons Telegram right now, so it's great to see you. All right, take care. See you.
Take care. Great to see you.